Everyone, welcome to our May Luncheon for YMWREA. To begin, I'd like to call upon David Brous, our chairman from 2006, to give today's invocation. David?
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to the board for an extraordinary year under extraordinary conditions. For an organization that thrives on in-person events to stay as active and relevant when all in-person events are virtual points to how strong the YMWREA will be in our soon-to-be post-pandemic city. Personally, I can't wait for our first in-person luncheon. Our panel today has four of my great friends who are also great New Yorkers. Our city, however, is currently at a crossroads. Hearing the terrible news of the shootings of a 4-year-old girl and 2 other tourists in Times Square over the weekend, I'm extremely concerned that instead of this city recovering from the pandemic stronger than ever, that business, tourists, and residents will stay away due to crime and quality of life concerns. All of us who work and live in New York City should realize the importance of public safety. For the first 4 months of this year, we have seen an 83% increase in shootings and a 17% increase in deaths. We cannot allow our city to fall back into the chaos of the 1970s. All of the work that our members do every day to bring businesses into New York will be for naught if people don't feel safe here. We have a very important mayoral primary election coming up next month. We in the real estate industry must work to elect a mayor who is committed to a safe city and one that a 4-year-old can feel comfortable buying a toy in Times Square. Please vote and please spread the word to others. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Very important message. I would now like to recognize the former chairman in attendance today: Kate Coburn, Dennis Carr, Ken Shack, Leslie Harwood, Nikki Harriet, Mark Lazan, David Brous, Sloan Rulin, Bill Montana, Rob Fink, Lindsay Ornstein, Lenny Lazzarino, and Laura Jackson. Thank you all for your continued support. In terms of announcements, REBNY is hosting a training on the ranked choice voting, and that will be next Tuesday, May 18th at 10 a.m. This is the new voting method that will be used in the upcoming primary elections, so definitely important for us to learn about it. We'll be sending an invite out to that event tomorrow, so please keep your eyes out for it. And now Lauren Calandrillo, our vice chairman, will speak about our events.
Hi, everyone. So we've officially concluded our spring get-togethers with great success. Thank you to everyone who came out. It was so nice to be together in person again. We also had a wonderful day participating in Cycle for Survival at MetLife Stadium. The YMWREA team raised $20,000 that will go directly to rare cancer research. Thank you to everyone that participated and donated. We have another in-person event coming up this Thursday at Hudson Commons on the 14th floor terrace. We'll hear a few words on the building from Kevin Hu and enjoy cocktails and light bites. Right now we're at max capacity, but we've started a wait list, so please let me know if you can no longer attend the event. On Wednesday, June 2nd, Boston Properties will be hosting us outside at Dock 72 in Brooklyn. John Powers will give a class on developing Manhattan office buildings, and of course we'll have food and drinks. Please RSVP on the website. We're so excited to support Crossroad Community Services, a wonderful food pantry right on Park Avenue at St. Bart's Church, which I'm sure a lot of you walk by all the time. Join us on Wednesday, June 9th for a tour, letter writing, and cocktails at Inside Park, the outdoor restaurants. We'll hear from former chairman Dennis Carr, who currently sits on the board of Crossroads. Please look out for the invite and details on the website shortly. And last, but certainly not least, we're setting up an art tour led by YMWREA member Cindy Glansrock the week of June 17th. We'll tour the Moynihan Train Hall Public Art Program, which some of you may know is the new Penn Station, followed by drinks and appetizers at Local, an outdoor restaurant nearby. We'll be finalizing a date shortly. Please look out for the invite. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll now turn it over to James Nelson, our membership chair this year, for a quick announcement.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Applications are due for spring membership this Friday. We have, looks like a great group who are going to be applying, but if there's anyone you still have in mind who qualifies, and you can find the criteria on our website under membership. You can also find the application there under join. So please have your applicant fill out the application along with the 4 letters of recommendation, and please have them emailed to me by Friday. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James. I would now like to introduce our panel for today. We have Hal Rosenbluth, CEO of Kaufman Astoria Studios, Doug Steiner, chairman of Steiner Studios, Alan Suna, owner, CEO of Silver Cup Studios, and our discussion will be moderated by one of our very own members, Ellen Israel of JRT Realty. We will be saving a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience, so please send in any questions via the Q&A link or chat feature. And I'll hand it over to you, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you to our distinguished panel, and thank you, where's my light going? Thank you to members and guests that are watching us today. The topic of this panel is the studio business in New York City, which generates billions of dollars for New York City and New York State. And before we get going, I just want to throw out a couple of statistics so everybody is aware of the impact of this business on New York City. And these statistics come from 2019 Empire State Development. There are approximately 79,000 jobs in New York City related to this business, 44,000 directly related to the production activity, 34,000 result of indirect and induced economic activity. Approximately $5.8 billion in earnings by New York City workers, 3.1 billion directly attributed to production activities, 2.7 billion direct results of indirect and induced activity. This brings approximately $16 billion of spending to the New York City economy, 8.6 billion direct spending by credit eligible projects, and 7.4 billion was indirect and induced spending. New York City collects 63 billion in taxes, 1.5 billion attributed to production and post-production credit. So the bottom line to these statistics is this industry is huge in impacting New York City and New York State. Part of the discussion today is how does the panel see this industry going forward? What can New York City do and New York State do to help you move forward? And what can we, the people in the audience, do to help you help your business? And the first, before we'd like to start, we'd like to understand how each of you got into this business. And Alan, I'll start with you.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm an architect developer, and getting into this and starting this here was a bit of an accident. Had to do with some inquiries that were misunderstood by one of the networks who was looking for storage space, when in fact we thought it was studio space. So Doug, I can give you the full download another time. In any event, we opened up one studio on June 15th, actually 1983, and with a Cool Whip commercial. And we have since grown to really hosting 8 simultaneous full scripted, series each and every day in 3 different locations. And we're going to be expanding, but it's not real estate for the faint of heart. It's really a business.
Al?
I got very lucky and met George Kaufman right a little before the time that he won the right to develop the studio, and he was looking for someone to come in that can learn the business with him. And I was lucky enough for him that he brought me in, and we kind of learned the business together. And we had to we used this facility to make the best possible production facility we could, and used it as a anchor to rejuvenate the neighborhood. Unfortunately, this area had come into, how do I put it, disrepair, I think would be the best way to put it. It was no different than the impact that a manufacturer going out of business in a small town would have on that small town. That impact happened on this pocket of Astoria. So we were able to use the studio to rejuvenate the neighborhood and grow the production facility to be the best possible one we could.
Doug?
I stumbled into it as well. I didn't know what I was doing. Seemed like a no-brainer. It was anything but. Ultimately found out I couldn't be financed when I was very pregnant. But for a divorce, I was going through at the same time, very acrimonious. Probably wouldn't have gotten built because I'm on city-owned land had a lot of milestones to meet, and kept having to do more and invest more. And before I knew it, I was in, but had no financing and got into a business that is not real estate. Everyone told me it's not real estate. It's an operating business, and I thought I knew better. But I know better now. It is not real estate. And when I went to the Navy Yard, it was a bombed out disaster. Nobody wanted to be there. I thought the real estate was good regardless. And we've continued to expand. So I started my deal in 1999, opened in 04, and we've continued to expand, have another 10, 15 years of expansion left, at which point we'll be 60 acres, about 1.6 million square feet. And then we're also doing a project in Sunset Park of about 650,000 square feet, should be in the ground next March.
So none of you were in the film television industry prior to your starting all of your studios. So that's always very exciting. So many.
Now, Ellen, you have to understand, Ellen, that when we were all doing it, there were no full service facilities sitting in New York. So it wasn't as if there was a whole lot of folks understanding that this was an operating business. I agree with both Doug and Alan on that, to find out what we were going to get into. The ideas were really coming from LA. Los Angeles was the ones with the experience of seeing full service studios. New York didn't have anything like it. So in essence, Kaufman and Silvercup and Steiner were pioneers in trying to make this happen or rejuvenate something that had gone away a long time ago. The Kaufman is 100 years old. So, but in between, the business went away. So bringing it back was something that I think all of us here are somewhat responsible for making happen.
And Hal has a Conestoga wagon parked in his parking space over at Kaufman Astoria.
So in continuing in that, you guys created an industry that is an economic driver in New York City and New York State. Let's continue on that path. There's been a lot said, pro and con, about the tax benefit that New York State provided. Do you think there should be more tax benefits that would be helpful to you competing against California, New Jersey, Vancouver, and Atlanta?
I think, make no mistake about it, the business is here because of the tax credit. It was not here before the tax credit by anything close to the scale it is now.
Right.
And if the tax credit goes away, the business goes away immediately. It lapsed for a short while several years ago, and productions packed up and left. Unfortunately, in New York, it is not it's not law. It is a bill passed every couple of years, and it burns off faster and faster. And every time it's a struggle to get it passed. Whereas in the UK, it is permanent forever. Georgia is very aggressively seeking the business and getting a lot of business down there, very pro-business state. And California has its own credit and a much bigger base of business than we have, or what we can achieve in any near future. And without the credit, it's gone. So Albany has to understand that, and that is a state credit. It is not a city credit.
I was on the phone earlier today with a senior production executive who has worked at all of our places. And he said he's spending most of his time shopping around for credits. He says production is basically driven by where the credits are the best. So for New York to think about abandoning it, as you know, some people have suggested, would be a grievous error. It's actually been ramped. The governor tweaked it down recently in the New York City metropolitan area from 30% of the below the line cost to 25%. And that's worked out okay. But to do anything further, I think would be a big mistake.
It's an education issue, Ellen. It is, we need to educate folks on what kind of economic impact this industry has had. I think when we talked earlier, our industry came back very quickly and very strongly. Yeah, that kind of proved what a pillar of the economy this is for for New York, and where you're trying to create a diversification of the economic model here. But I think it's also important to understand that when we talk about the impact of tax credit is, New York lost all its business in this industry because New York costs almost 40% more than any other location in which you're going to go and produce a movie or a television show. So what this credit is doing is it's not making it cheaper, it's making the premium affordable so that producers will take advantage of New York.
And there are some producers who still say, even with the credits, New York is still too expensive. But you have to remember, Ellen said something earlier about indirect, and it's not something that is really small. Doug right now is doing a reboot of a show we did for 7 seasons and a couple of movies called Sex and the City. And Sex and the City was, in many respects, as was 2 other shows that we did. One was called Girls, and the other one was called Gossip Girl. And these were love letters to New York. And they drove business, they drove tourism to New York. I had friends from Europe who said they had their daughters watch these shows to help them learn English so that they could have that as another language. So my point is that our industry has impact far beyond just the direct jobs that we have.
Could you explain a little bit more how that filters out, how the jobs ripple effect out?
Well, between hotels, restaurants, suppliers from lumber, paint, hardware, and any variety of other industries that support the folks that we do. They would not otherwise, have that business at all. And
it has an impact surrounding the stages. Alan and I were on a panel once, and the producer of Men in Black didn't talk about what Will Smith was paid. He talked about how much money they spent in the local pizzeria and how much money they spent in the local dry cleaner. And the reaction was amazing in the audience. Like, ooh, a reaction, because no one expects that. But to that dry cleaner and those local pizzerias around here, that made their year. And it has an extraordinary impact. One of the reasons people chase this industry so much is because it has a very big economic impact in a very short period of time. So, these shows aren't years in the making. They're 6 months, 9 months in the making. And all that money is spent in this short period of time in New York, and it impacts not only the folks working in the industry, but the folks surrounding the industry. And I think that there's no way to understate that. It is a huge impact.
So you guys were shut down during the pandemic like everybody else was. You're gradually coming back. We know, those of us who live around town see the signs up, see the arrows up for the food trucks and everything. We see the productions coming back. When do you think we'll hit like 2019 earnings again, where everything is booked? People are fighting for stage space and having to go to Yonkers because they can't get anything in New York City.
Who wants to have fun with this one?
I'll let Doug start.
From my point of view, there is no gradual about it. It started off just gradually as the protocols were being put in place on how to make this happen. And we're back. I don't want to speak for Doug and Alan, but I think the industry is pretty booked solid in New York right now.
I think there's a myth out there that, stage availability is the choke point in the business. And I wanted to throw some cold water on that one, because the limiting factor here is crew availability. The unions are at full employment. Doesn't matter how many stages are out there. There's only so much that can be produced in New York because the crews are all full. They're taken care of. Secondly, the tax credit. The tax credit is I can't remember it anymore, $420 million a year. I want to point out it makes money for the state. It makes money hand over fist for the city. So it's a credit that promotes this huge economic growth, but it also makes money and is a no-brainer economically. Politically, it's difficult because it's seen as a subsidy, but it makes money, and that's been proven in study after study. But the limiting factor here is crew availability and tax credit money, and not stage availability. Unfortunately, we're all developers. I think Hal's a developer, Alan's a developer. My real job is a developer. Most uses now stink. Industry, retail's tough. Residential condos are tough. Rentals are down. Industrial is strong. Office is down. And people think that studios are the panacea. And I'm worried about the industry getting overbuilt by people who think it's like any other use they would build for. Unlike any other use, there's a crew availability factor that's not there in any other use. It's a special purpose type of construction, and it's a very heavy service industry. It's an operating business. My payroll's huge, and there are 12 customers in the world, ultimately. And that's the limit on who can come do business with me. There is not an infinite supply like almost any other use.
Yet your building, you won an EDC RFP to build additional stages in Brooklyn. What will that look like?
The reason I did that is I didn't want somebody else to do them because I figured they get built because EDC wanted to see that they got built. So I'd rather do them myself than somebody else. But I'm not crazy about adding to the supply because of what I just said. We will be in the ground in March next year, 8 stages, 600, 250, 450, about 700,000 feet of space plus parking with all the support space. It'll total about 700,000 feet.
Has anyone spoken for them yet? Or is it too soon?
It took me a long time. Alan and Hal were in this business a long time. I don't consider myself a pioneer at all. Those guys get the credit for that for sure. It took me a long time to get a filter in the entertainment business. They're much better at bullshit than real estate people, believe it or not. And every LA studio will tell you how much they'll take your space and you should build this and you should build that, and there's a demand for it. They have no downside. The more product that's out there, the lower their costs. Right. And they're very convincing. You don't see office tenants doing that. You don't see retail tenants doing that. A little bit of retail, but these people have no reason to but to encourage you, and they go state to state, encouraging tax credits and encouraging stages.
That's what they do.
And they're full of shit.
It's
Okay.
accurate.
Okay. Well, the stages seem to be reaching the corporate levels of interest, as there are a lot of corporate operators, Hudson Pacific, Blackstone, and others that are staking their claim into some of the studios. Is that a trend, or is that, it's the flavor of the month type of thing?
How?
Right now, we're flavor of the month. And I'm not as concerned when folks like Hudson Pacific and others are getting into it. My concern becomes the one-off guys that think it's a wonderful business to be in, open up some warehouse somewhere, call it a stage, and then compete with Alan and Doug and I and some of the others that have put major money into creating an infrastructure that is what we'll call a real studio or real stage. I've never had a problem with someone that's willing to do what I'm doing and put the money in to build a correct facility. It's the one-off guy that thinks it's the flavor of the month and buys a bunch of warehouses and slaps a sign on the wall. It is an operating business, and to Doug's point, it's an industry that the more tax credit, the more build more, because the more optionality that they get, the more they can play musical chairs and reduce the pricing. It's always been the concern I've had, that we overbuild until the market dies, right? And you can't afford to build these kinds of structures in that manner, because it's a very specialized type of facility that you're building.
So that leads us to your new studios at On Stage at Kaufman Astoria Studios. Why did you feel the need to build those?
Well, at the time we believed it was the right thing for us to do. We had been turning away business at the time. We also wanted to fill out our back lot. It was the last piece of property on the street that we view as our back lot. And it was the right thing to do. And we were able to fill them up on a longer term deal before they opened. So we knew we had built the right type of facility that for companies that wanted to still remain in this environment. What Alan and Doug and I have built is an environment. It is a studio facility. It is not just a one-off building somewhere. It is you walk around and there are other people in the production business around here. It's like a campus. And so we've added to our campuses in order to make this work.
I think Hal also gets, will get his rezoning to add a tremendous amount of density by having the lure of the stages to the city officials who make that call. So
first thing in transparency, I need to say, JRT Realty Group are the leasing agents of the offices above the stages O&M at Kaufman Astoria Studios. We still have only 50,000 square feet left, and we invite everyone to come see the fabulous new studios and the office space at Kaufman Astoria Studios, and we'll follow up with that after.
Mom, Dad.
Thank
Well,
you.
I hate to break it to you, Ellen, but if he's got somebody on the stage, you can't take anybody through it because of the protocols.
Okay, we'll have a picture.
Well, I can go to the office space above.
Okay, we'll see the office space above and what it's like to be on a real studio like in California. Where's my light going out? The other thing
You're right, Alan. What I've done is the same thing that Douglas and Alan have done in trying to create a lot, trying to give that that sense of quote unquote Hollywood, both for the individual productions and producers that come and they have that expectation, as well as how the lot can be used by others that are supportive of the industry.
Now, in building a studio for the people in this audience who are mostly real estate people, we know the cost of building an office building, the all-in approximate cost. We know what that equates for, what rent needs to be had. What is the cost of building the studio, the on stage, the ceiling heights, the lights, the power? What can you break that down into a square foot number for us so we have an idea of the impact of the capital that goes into that?
Douglas, you can take this one.
I'll pass.
These are very, very expensive rooms to create. And you just have to think about it a little bit differently, because the ceiling heights, are in the 40, 50 feet realm, and the amount of power and air conditioning and acoustic separation that has to go into these things. Even if you were to build office spaces and 4 floors of office space, it doesn't even equate to what it costs to build these things. And then you have to keep in mind, I used to say, and I still don't think it's terribly wrong, is that if you are going to build these things and just rent it out as real estate and not run it as a business, you'll be out of business inside of a year. You will not make enough money just renting the real estate. You have to provide a whole host of other equipment and services that you really need to be quite facile in and understand, as distinguished from saying, oh, okay, it's like a hotel, I'll just rent rooms. It's not like that at all.
Well, that's why we're trying to show that it's not just real estate. It's an operating business.
Building a clear span box And that box is very unique because you're having to create heights of 40 feet to a grid that can support the hanging of structures on. And it has to be soundproof, and it has to have an incredible amount of air conditioning and power attached to it. This does not go into an office building and let's turn it into a stage. It just doesn't work that way. It'd make all our lives easier if it was, because it'd be a lot less costly to build. But you're building an incredible structure that it has to support a tremendous amount of weight. So your big money in this is in the structure, if you're going to do it right, in the soundproof doors that have to be put in. So anyone that has a visual of a stage, you know, from the old Hollywood days, it's basically accurate. So we don't build barrels anymore as the roof. You know, we make them flat.
You know, again, it's an operating business and a costly one. You're dealing with unions, you're dealing with everything that they have to show it to you. So Alan, you recently made a deal with Hackman Capital.
Yep.
And the question is, do you see yourself expanding in the New York metropolitan area? Or where?
Okay, the answer is yes. I mean, that was one of the reasons we brought Hackman Capital in. I'm happy to say, and I think the other fellows know, I mean, we weren't actively looking for another capital partner. This is something that kind of happened, and I think it's going to work out really well. We're going to be building additional studios, both in Queens and in the Bronx, you know, attached to our current facilities. It's great to have a capital partner that really, I think Doug had said it early on about these were always difficult things to finance. I certainly know that from my 40 years in doing this. And having a different kind of a partner in there really helps us to do this. But the Hackman folks, who, by the way, I love working with, what was particularly interesting is that they are in this same business in a big way in California, also in Canada, and actually all over the world. So it was a strategic move on their part to enter the New York market. And, so there you go. And like Doug now, I'm a chairman. I'm no longer a CEO. They changed my title.
Yay. So it's good news that there are expansion plans on the table. Kaufman Astoria has expanded. Doug, you're expanding. Robert De Niro, we don't know if that's still going forward, but that was on the table. Is this expansion going to be detrimental, or is it going to be helpful to you all?
I think when Hal expands, I expand. A show that's on 2 stages might now have 3 stages. 3-stage show, just big show, might have 4, but it's not like that workforce is growing. So those stages that are being built are still accommodating the same number of shows, but it's making bigger, more expensive shows possible to come to New York because there's that more space for that single show. It's not new business that's coming in per se. And that's why it's consistent with what we're talking about in terms of the limiting factors on demand.
And it's also interesting in that some of our earlier sound stages that we built are on the smaller side, and they were fine for television commercials. But the television commercial industry has largely left New York in its entirety. And those smaller stages are now acting as construction shops, the most expensive construction shops in America. Not to rent, but they were built that way. So
we know Disney's building new stages. Netflix is building new stages. All the streaming services seem to be out there looking for space. So from where we sit, reading the same newspapers everybody else is reading, it appears that there's a lot of business chasing these stages. And we're hoping, as we're hoping people come back to New York, back to their offices, that this is all good for the city of New York. Can you comment that?
I think there's a difference between getting people to move from Southern California to New Mexico to work in stages there for Netflix, where the cost of living is a fraction of Southern California, or expanding in LA, where the size of the business is just multiples larger than New York, and the workforce is multiples larger, and bringing people to move to New York, which is as high as cost as there is, to make their career here if they can get into the union. That's basically does not open up to people. The unions consider it a generational issue, and they're not really going to grow because they think that is too risky for them. It's a very not the most progressive mindset. That's all I'll say.
So it seems to me from what you're saying that New York is not the friendliest place to do business, whereas other states are opening their doors. Vancouver is opening their doors, and we're sort of closing our doors. So aside from the unions and the tax credits, I'd like to open it up to you guys to say, what can we as residents of New York City, New York State, do to help you? And what would you want the politicians to do in this upcoming new political scene? What can they do to help you? What can we do? What can they do?
I think the most important thing is the world of word of mouth and talking to people that you know, that this is a business that generates a lot of jobs. It actually, the tax credit, which brings the business here, pays for itself unequivocally. And to not listen to the narrative that characterizes it as corporate welfare. It's just the nature of the beast. These tax credits started in Canada, they migrated to England, and then they came into the United States. And until everybody gets rid of them altogether, it's just part of the groundwork that we have to be able to participate in. But it's such an easy narrative on the part of certain folks, and particularly elected officials, to say that this is, it's corporate welfare. They'll come anyway. They don't. They have so many options all over the world. We in New York often are a little too egocentric, thinking, oh, they've got to come here. They don't have to come here. So got to keep that in mind.
The other thing is the one thing the public, I think, dislikes about the industry is when they're shooting on the streets and location shoots that take up parking. And without the locations in New York, it really takes away from one of New York's great features, which is the variety of streetscapes that they can use and not have to build. And unfortunately, I think it's a fantastic thing that the city made outdoor dining the way it did. I think it'll be great for the city, but to the extent that interferes with permits for location shoots, or people kowtow to people losing that space for a night, that is the price to pay for this economic stimulus. And without these location shoots on the streets, without permitting being easy, the business has to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Doug's point is really well taken. I remember I was at a dinner one night sitting next to someone who lived on the Upper East Side. And he says, oh, you're in that business, those goddamn trucks and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I said, whoa. I said, let me tell you the kind of jobs that these trucks create. And I went through much of what you heard earlier. And he actually apologized to me. He said, I had no idea that it was that much of an economic engine. Excuse me for going off the way that I did, and he went off pretty strongly. We just have to tell our fellow New Yorkers what the real story is.
It's an education process that has to happen because, you know, this is depending on what study you look at, a $9 to $12 billion industry for the state of New York, of which the bulk of that is sitting down in New York City. The amount of jobs, the jobs we're creating are not minimum wage jobs. These are good paying jobs. These folks are earning a living and are able to spend their money in homes and in cars and in appliances and all this kind of stuff that you want to have happen. The other part, as Alan said earlier, it is how it's free advertising for the city. The way New York gets looked at in film and television is what the world sees and makes it attractive for and helps tourism happen. So it's a mixed bag, but it's about education, understand what it means. You know, we deliver hundreds of millions of dollars into the budget of the city of New York that helps them fund things, fund services that happen. You know, the state gets a repayment in terms of it's not a tax credit, it's an investment. So you ask what they really can do, they can stop making it with a sunset so that Douglas and Alan and Hal are going up with our hands outstretched every few years up to the legislature and make it a permanent tax credit like most of the tax credits are in this state.
And it's important to know we don't get the credit. The producers get the credit. It is just enabling producers to make a decision to come to New York. And Caroline just posted a question. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this or not, but he said, COVID had a major impact on the world's perception of New York. How can the film industry help? Let's call it film and television, because that's really what it is. New York has really become a TV town. And the way it helps is to have more of these shows with positive outlooks of New York on the streets of New York, showing how terrific it is to be in New York, you know, like we had, you know, 10 and 15 years ago. I mean, prior to that, if you really go back to the days of, I guess it was during the Koch administration, Hal, you know, whether it was Jerry Ford telling New York to drop dead, but, you know, the movies that were being made here were more akin to Fort Apache, the Bronx, and, you know, and you know, graffiti and this and that. And that's not the New York that we have today. We have a much healthier, better, friendlier New York. And we just need to promote that image.
So again, if I were to say, who are 3 people that we were to write to and say, this is something important to us, who are those 3 people? The governor, our legislators?
It's your legislators. It is your state assembly people, your state senator, and your local council. The local council and the, you know, those 3 are the ones that get the loudest complaints from the fewest number of people. And they need to hear from people in a positive way how important this is to New York. The governor already knows. The lieutenant governor already knows. The local Congress people do know, but they're not the ones that are impacting this kind of stuff. So you really, it is, you know, all politics is local. Senate, Assembly, Council, these are the people that need to know that they have your support, that this business continue.
Then maybe we can get a list of some of those names and send them out to our membership for
Alan is right. It's we have a tough time in New York getting out of our own way. We have to stop making it difficult to conduct business in New York. You know, I went to several panels, you know, and on that, made up of a variety of industries. And after the panel, I heard these folks that work for the city go, you know, no matter how hard it is to do business in New York, they still keep doing business in New York. And I always said one day that's going to bite them in the tush. And you know, we're nearing that point. We need to bring New York back. We have to welcome business back to New York. We have to make it not as difficult to conduct business in New York. And every time we turn around, what Alan's referring to, these folks are putting another bill in the council to prevent the industry from going on location. And then Alan or Doug and I get a call from some production exec and say, you know, what's going on? They don't want us there. And so the MPA starts getting involved and lobbying the city council so as to not to pass a ridiculous bill about something. We got to stop getting in our own way. It is difficult to do business in New York to begin with. We should not make it any more difficult to do it.
And I know we agree with you, we the audience who's listening to you, because we know what's going on. People are leaving and going to Miami. I don't know if I should ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who do you guys like for mayor? You don't have to say.
You need someone who's going to be a good steward, okay, of the city, who has already demonstrated that they can manage a large enterprise, which is what New York City is. Not someone who is throwing out political sound bites and coming up with empty promises to people that they'll never be able to fulfill. So you just think about, who you would want to take care of you on a going forward basis. That would be the kind of candidate I'd be looking for.
And Ellen, I think we're getting towards the end, so I think we can open it up to questions from the audience. We've had a few come in so far, so I'll turn it over to Lauren to ask those. And then if anyone has more questions, please go ahead and send them in now.
Sure. Thank you guys. That was super interesting, and I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure everyone did. So one question we got in is, do you foresee any potential for adaptive reuse of office buildings for studio space?
Nope.
It's clear span, no columns.
Yeah.
It's not practical.
That doesn't exist. Even if you were to take floors out of an existing office building, it doesn't work because the columns are not designed to be unbraced. Somebody, I have a big office building, I'll just take out a couple of floors. It doesn't work that way. It's the redistribution. I mean, I'm an architect, so therefore I do know these things. It actually does not work. There's an interesting question I saw, Lauren, from someone who is questioning about studio space competing with the Amazons of this world for logistics. And I guess the joke of it would always be that if they took away the tax credits, that our backup plan is to be Amazon warehouses. But the point of the questioner, I guess it was James who brought it up. And while it hasn't been, it's not built yet, but if you look at Andrew Chung's efforts over on Borden Avenue near our facilities, the first 2 floors of his building are devoted to logistics, that kind of stuff. And he's trying to see if he can work out a studio thing on an upper level, which I will tell you is incredibly difficult to achieve, which is, a different kind of issue that the folks that are building down on 19th Avenue, I guess it is, in Astoria, trying to do 2-level studios that, frankly, they just don't work.
Okay, another question we had from the audience is, why is there a concern that crew availability will be the limiting factor? Won't it catch up soundstage availability demand?
The unions, there's no requirement that the unions open up their membership. This is a union business. And the unions control how many members they have. And if history is any guide, they're not opening it up very much at all.
Yeah. And the same production executive that I spoke with, I referenced earlier, said to me very clearly, not only is he chasing tax credits, but he's also chasing crew availability. He said it's really hard to get crew. Frankly, it's not just New York, it's on a worldwide basis.
And it's not like you can hire someone off the street and say, oh, you're now a union member. This is a skilled labor force. That's
Right.
building something very specific for this industry. And it takes a long time to train folks to be able to work in these groups.
That makes sense. And another question from the audience. In your opinion, should there be a federal legislation preventing a race to the bottom in tax credits between the states, similar to a global minimum tax?
Oh, that's great. Let's legislate, everything under the sun. I think we have too much legislation as it is, so I can answer that very clear. But absolutely, the Fed should stay out of local government.
If there's a 40% premium to working in New York without a tax credit, the worst thing that could happen is that there's no ability to have a tax credit here. We get back to having a handful of shows.
All right, and I think we have one more question, unless we get any last minute ones. Again, I know a little bit about the studio business working with Hal at On Stage, so I'm not sure if you do measure the rent this way, but I will ask, what rent levels per square foot are you seeing given the high cost to build discussed earlier? For building build-to-suit production studio campus, are tenants agreeing to pay a rent size on what return on cost, similar to what we're seeing in the logistics space?
So I'm going to interrupt and answer this question. That question is asked by someone who lives in a box of real estate. I don't know who it is, but the fact of the matter is that they can exist in that square box. This is not that square box. Doesn't work that way. And your revenue is not just dependent upon what you get in dollars per square foot. It is not necessarily thought of that way.
What does per square foot mean? We just don't measure. We don't price it that way. We don't measure it that way. We don't.
Yeah.
It's just not done.
We don't rent, our business is not done on a per foot basis, because no matter what size the stage is we are taking, it comes with so many other things that have to be factored in into the deal you're making. So you're ending up making really a dollar deal, not a per foot deal. Very different math to get to the bottom line.
It's as much art as it is, probably more art than it is science.
Okay, final question we have from the audience. Is there a clustering of this business occurring in Queens for a reason? Is it just the price? We see Amazon, Apple, De Niro, Silvercup, Kaufman. Why is it happening all in Queens?
Well, it's not happening all in Queens.
Well, we also have Brooklyn, as we know.
And the Bronx.
And the Bronx.
You know?
There is a majority in Queens. Do you guys think that there's a reason for that?
I don't know. I mean, I have a pretty big studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I'm building a pretty big one in Sunset Park. Brooklyn generally might be more expensive than Queens. Queens is more expensive than the Bronx. It's a question of where you can find enough land. But
It's the space.
Thank God Brooklyn became hot, because all I heard when I was building the first studio was no one will ever go to Brooklyn.
Okay. This is the last question, I promise. So the audience is still a little unclear on how you are getting the rent. If it's not a per square foot basis, how are you measuring the rent? How are you collecting money on the studios?
I have a dartboard in the office, and we just kind of throw darts. Now, over the years, we've developed.
I was told that we've always done this in a funny way, but the way we've done sort of offices or rooms, it's that someone needs an extra space. How much is it? It's pick a number. It's $2,000 a week. How big is it? How big do you need it to be? We don't do it on a per foot basis here. It's understanding your client, it's understanding the market, it's understanding the overall needs that have to be all inclusive into the numbers you're giving these people.
The spaces that are taken over the course of production, the footprint of that production changes almost by the day. So this is not real estate.
Yep.
Yeah, we're a daily transactional business, basically.
It's a business that uses real estate as a tool, much in the way that a carpenter will use a hammer, use nails, use lumber, use saws. Real estate is just one essential tool in order to provide these services. And if you had, I mean, what would you guess, Hal, in terms of the diversity of the equipment that we have? There's probably, we each have at least 10,000 different items in inventory. All right.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's a whole other world.
All right.
It's understanding. When I used to deal with George Kaufman, I remember a long time ago, we made a deal for the movie Ransom, and it was a 9-month contract. And I was so excited. I actually walked in with like champagne with him. And he looked at my 9-month deal and he said, "What am I supposed to do with this? I can't take it to the bank." Because he had a real estate hat on. You know, our contracts are basically the world of transient tenants. Every production is just a matter of months. It's very rare that you get multiple seasons out of a production. To do a TV show or a movie is on average 6 to 9 months, and then you're looking for it again. So I kind of judge about 2.5 months before the end of production A, I start losing sleep to make sure I'm going to have someone coming in behind that production. So it's just the nature of the beast. It's very different than, you know, my colleagues in the Manhattan office that are all real estate. They see that tenant when they sign the lease, and they see him 9.5 years later when they're negotiating a renewal. That's not our world at all. Our world is constant. It's constant thinking about renting these facilities out.
And Lauren, I know we have to finish, but I want to say I'm looking forward to the day when we no longer have to wear these silver cup branded masks.
I think we can all agree on that very much. Hopefully that's around the corner.
Thank you, Alan. That's the perfect ending for this. We really appreciate all of your time and thoughts. This was super educational for myself. I definitely hope I speak for everyone on the call. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And to all the rest of the audience, we will see you next month virtually again, but then this fall we plan to see you in person. So looking forward to that very much. And thank you, Ellen, for doing such a great job moderating today.
Thank you, gentlemen, and we will get legislators' names out to everyone so they can send letters.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.